Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has announced that he is suing a Catholic non-governmental organisation operating in Texas named Annunciation House. He alleges that it is encouraging illegal immigration and even operating a stash house for those entering illegally. Joining me now to discuss is Newsweek Senior Editor-at-Large and host of the Josh Hammer Show, Josh Hammer. Josh, this organisation describes itself as a volunteer operation that offers hospitality to migrants, immigrants and refugees in El Paso, Texas. But it seems they're doing a bit more than that.
Yeah, it does. Look, Rita, you're not allowed to abet those who would violate the law. And, you know, one of the great ironies, one of the great understated things when it comes to America's immigration discourse is that we have all this talk about illegal aliens, or heck, maybe we should call them just undocumented workers, to use the rhetoric of the day when it comes to the left. You know, their very first act when it comes to getting in this country is a crime. It is a crime to cross the border without permission, without authorization to do so. So if you are an NGO, if you are an organization, if you are a corporation, if you are an individual person, if you are an 18, 19-year-old United States adult, and you are aiding and abetting those who are trying to commit a crime, which again, crossing the border is, then you are liable to face repercussions for that. So good for Attorney General Ken Paxton. You know, Ken Paxton is actually a very controversial figure, not just in America at large, but also within the conservative movement. I happen to be a longtime big fan of his for reasons just like this. Ken Paxton is not afraid to wield the political power that is vested in his particular political office to try to punish the forces of civilizational arson and to try to boost the forces of civilizational sanity. And, you know, in America's long, roiling, cold, but at times sometimes getting slightly hot culture war and, frankly, cold civil war, we need people like Paxton on our side. And what's happening in Texas is unprecedented, Rita, in American history. We've all seen the footage. It's absolutely horrible. It is absolutely horrific. And, you know, this charity in El Paso, they might think that they're acting in humanitarian fashion. They might think that they are helping people, but you know who's being harmed by illegal immigration? It's all the other people of Texas. It's those who are competing against illegal aliens for jobs. It's those whose wages are being suppressed. It's those whose safety is being undermined and jeopardized on a day in, day out basis. It's the shelters. It's the hospitals. It's all those whose services are being strained by these criminals, by these trespassers, by these lawbreakers. So I say good for Ken Paxton, and also good for his boss, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, who is continuing now weeks into this fight with the federal government. Greg Abbott actually doubled down earlier this week, said that he is not going to back down from having the Texas Rangers and the Texas Department of Public Safety secure the southern border. That is Texas's right as a sovereign entity in our federal system of government. Good for the state of Texas. They are leading the way right now.
Absolutely. And I don't know, there's a lot of Ron DeSantis about Ken Paxton. I've been watching his work as well. He just does practical stuff. He does the hard stuff to make meaningful change. And then the numbers in the US, just astonishing. More than 7 million have crossed illegally into the country under the Biden administration. You think about 7 million, that's bigger than the population of big cities. I mean, it is transformative and it needs to stop. Now, Josh, the fallout from this farcical ruling against Trump in New York continues. We've spoken about the truckers boycott on this program before, and experts warning it could have businesses thinking twice about investing in what is a banana republic state when it comes to lawfare. And here is a prime example of that. Grant Cardone, boss of Cardon Capital, he's going to discontinue all underwriting in New York real estate. He wrote, immediately discontinue all underwriting on New York real estate. The risk outweighs the opportunities at this time. Josh, how little trust do people have in the justice system in America? From afar, it looks to be hopelessly politicized and weaponized in some cases.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Look, I mean, I'm a lawyer by background. I went to law school. I worked at a big law firm. I clerked for a federal appeals court, for a federal appeals judge back in Texas, back in the year 2018. And I still speak at law schools all across America, for that matter. And, you know, it's not an easy thing for someone with my background, based on what I just said. It's not easy for someone like me to kind of just sigh and say, you know what, it's really kind of lost. And I'm not saying it's lost, but we are really, really far down the rabbit hole at this point, Rita. And unfortunately, there's really not a ton of glimmers of hope at this present moment, because what's happening to Donald Trump in particular when it comes to the Democrats' sprawling, unprecedented, uncharted waters lawfare operation. I mean, look at what's happening in New York with this so-called fraud ruling from Justice Arthur and Goron in this Tish James. First of all, Tish James, the Attorney General of New York, when she ran for Attorney General of New York, she literally ran on the campaign stump on a Get Trump platform. She was telling you that when I get there, I'm gonna do everything I can to try to get him in jail, try to bankrupt him, try to do whatever it takes. That is completely un-American. It's the definition of being un-American. In fact, in the American Constitution, we have a prohibition on what was known as so-called bills of attainder, which is pieces of legislation that actually name someone. You can't have a bill that is targeting someone here. So why would you be able to then run for office and just target someone on the campaign trail? It's ridiculous. $460+ million, including backdated interest payments. Absolutely disgusting. So you take that, you combine it with the actual criminal prosecutions. So there's 4 criminal prosecutions. You add that to the ballot access challenge, this recent Supreme Court case for which we are still now awaiting a ruling in the Trump versus Anderson case, this appeal out of Colorado to see whether they can even deny him a place on the ballot outright. It's absolutely unreal. So whether it is bankrupting him, whether it is prosecuting him, whether it is denying ballot access, whether it is God knows what else, they're literally leaving no stone unturned whatsoever to try to deprive him from being the 47th president of the United States after, God willing, Joe Biden finishes his presidency this November. It's absolutely appalling, Rita. And at this point, I've said it many times, I'll say it again on your show right now. If Republicans have any intention whatsoever of fighting back against this lawfare, unfortunately, they're going to have to get their hands a little dirty and get in the business of trying to take some high-profile scalps on the other side as well. Such tactics like that, they might seem a little unnatural for Republicans who talk a lot about neutral enforcement of the law, but you have to rebalance the pendulum. And sometimes you're going to have to bloody some noses on the other side in order to then reach a mutually agreeable long-term standoff.
You are 100% right, and it just shocks me that so few Republicans realise that is the only way they can fight this insanity. You can't be playing by a different set of rules and expect your opponents to respect those rules when they have shown you what they're capable of, and they have got no bottom. They're trying to imprison their main political rival. That's where we are. So trying to have a discussion about this, I think we're well past that point. I think you're absolutely right. They have to employ some of these tactics themselves. Now let's talk about El Salvador President Nayib Bukele, who's annihilated a BBC reporter who criticised his tough on crime stance. That country has gone through a anti-crime revolution, and let's just see how he schooled this journalist.
We took the recipes from the European Union, we took the recipes from the United States. None of the recipes worked. More bloodshed, more people were dying. So what do? Okay, we do something and we save people. And now we're the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. But suddenly something's bad. Oh, but you shouldn't do that. You should do what I think you should do. Why? Not only we have the right to do what we think is right, and what the Salvadoran people are going to decide whether or not they want this day in free elections, but also we've proven it works. So stop trying to make us use your recipes because they don't work here. You have your own system. We don't tell you that you shouldn't have a monarchy.
The falling crime in El Salvador has been extraordinary. In 2023 alone, the homicide rate fell 70%. Josh, it turns out when you lock up violent criminals, they can't commit any more crimes.
Yeah, you know, Rita, the inspiring story of Nayib Bukele has been one of the great political stories on the world stage over the past year and a half, 2 years. I'm actually flying to Washington, D.C. from Florida, where I live, in just a few hours to speak at the CPAC conference that is being held right now in Washington, D.C., and Bukele is actually speaking at it as well. I'm hoping that I get to meet him actually in person because I want to personally thank him. His country, El Salvador, was one of the murder capitals of the world, not just one of the murder capitals of North America, one of the literal murder capitals of the entire world, had one of the absolute highest homicide rates, murder rates, other rates of other forms of violent crime, rape, you name it. And MS-13, the horrific transnational gang that is very close to many of the leading Mexican drug cartels, MS-13 comes from El Salvador. It was as bad as it gets. And you know what? Are people gonna complain that what he's doing is maybe it's illiberal or maybe it's not nice? Sure, they can complain all they want, but the results speak for themselves, Rita. The violent crime rate, if I'm not mistaken, in El Salvador right now, it might be lower than the United States is as a whole. It's certainly lower than the overwhelming majority of major blue American cities. It actually might be lower than the country as a whole there. So if the results are working this well, if he is taking one of the murder, I think it is. Yeah, if he is taking one of the murder capitals of the entire world and has made it on a per capita basis safer than the United States. Are you kidding me? I mean, at that point, take your delicate, idiosyncratic sensibilities and throw them out the freaking window. At that point, it's time to go to school to look at what policies he's doing and to just implement it, start there.
You are right. I think that the homicide rate now, the violent crime rate, is on par with Canada, and so one of the lowest in the region. So amazing transformation there, and it probably explains why he won the election with, I don't know, around 80% of the vote. It was comprehensive. Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rita.